Welcome to the Talent Talks podcast with me, your host, Martin Smith, MD and founder of Talent Drive. We're a specialist procurement supply chain recruitment agency across the UK. We are back with a new series and a new look. And this week, our first guest was someone I've known for a long time, Tim Elliott, who's currently head of group procurement at Romans Leaders Group. Tim has had a diverse journey of procurement, working in the industry for nearly 20 years. He began his career joining Tesco on their graduate scheme and hasn't looked back, working for various companies in retail, automotive and property, both in the UK and internationally. He now heads up procurement for one of the largest UK property services companies, Leaders Romans Group, where over the last 3 years, he's taken the area from a brownfield space to a mature procurement function. On this episode, we discuss everything from Tim's development in his career in terms of becoming a head of procurement and the key ingredients to be a successful leader. And we also hone in on talking around people and the importance of procurement in modern day organizations. I hope you enjoy the episode. Tim, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's kick things off with, how did you get into procurement in the first place, Tim?
Yeah, the famous question, right? How do people end up in procurement? So actually, I came out of university and I ended up working for BMW where I lived. My dad worked there actually, and I needed some money because I was going to go traveling. So it ended up that I worked there for a little bit, and then I was working on reception, and then it just developed. I just got on really well with the team there. So before I knew it, I was working used car sales, managing all the handover process. And then it flowed from there, and then I started working in corporate, and I just didn't like sales. It just didn't interest me.
Okay.
No. I'd always knew I wanted to do something corporate. For the listeners, I did a music degree, which is completely different, but I always knew I wanted to go down a corporate route and do something commercial related. But yeah, so I ended up sort of going into corporate sales, not really enjoying it, and then thinking I knew something else. And actually, at the time, I was really watching what the buyers were doing in BMW. So they were doing lots of used car buying and going out and sourcing various things. And it was super interesting. And that kind of fueled my interest really. And I just kind of read more from there. And then I started applying for graduate schemes. And before I knew it, I joined Tesco on their graduate scheme in procurement.
Okay, very good. So what I'm curious, having working in sales, what didn't you like about sort of, because I guess procurement in a way, it's selling in many respects. You're selling your services, you're selling being in procurement, the value you can add. So what was that perhaps sort of switched you off from that?
Yeah, I think it was very, very cold end of selling when we talk about, selling cars. It's a really tough environment. I really do admire the guys that go into it. It's a world that is very unique, car selling, and I just didn't really enjoy seeing the process of sort of cold calling. And I think probably actually to embellish on that a little bit, I was quite young at the time. I think that's the other thing I'd say, that I was at work at BMW. Well, openly, when you're sort of 22 years old, you don't buy a BMW. So that was a lot of working with a lot older people. What's your average BMW buyer? I don't know, 50, 60 years old. So, trying to sell in that world when you're very young was quite difficult as well. So, that's probably why, to be honest. Just age and seeing what's going on. Yeah.
And then obviously onto the graduate program at Tesco, which is renowned, and some amazing people that I know as well. And in fact, I lived with a couple of people that were on the Tesco grad scheme back in the day when I first moved to London. So in terms of that, I presume with that you got an opportunity to rotate and work across various different category areas, did you, Tim, and have that sort of exposure?
Yeah, so I was there on the graduate scheme for a couple of years. So exactly that. It was fantastic. It was an experience like no other. Working for the biggest private employer in the UK is going to give you massive exposure. So exactly that. Get there day one, throw you in a store, that kind of stuff. Work in a store for a month, work it out. You need to take initiative, and that's kind of got with me during my career. Actually, is kind of the throw people in the deep end. Be there to make sure they don't sink, but that kind of environment is a fantastic place to be in. So I was in stores for a couple of months in the first year on 2 different occasions, doing different things, different stores. I did a stint on cleaning in distribution, tenders, straight into e-auctions, and then I also did a recycled car wash. There was a drought at the time in the UK, so they needed a program of recycling in the car washes. So I did a big rollout program on that, finding a supplier, what would work with our current car washes, rolling it all out. And then second year was into distribution and Express, Tesco Express. into construction for a year, which was just completely different.
Yeah.
Just kind of a deer in headlights, really. But that's the best way to learn, which is probably why Tesco do so well, is they just throw their people into tough jobs, and you either sink or swim, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, spot on. I think that's sometimes one of the best ways to learn. And obviously with procurement professionals, do you think it sort of, you've worked in retail, obviously you've worked in automotive, you've worked in various different sort of sectors. Do you think procurement's approach is dependent on the sector you're working in, or is it more around the maturity of the procurement team? What have you sort of learned over the years around transitioning from different industry sectors in procurement?
For me, procurement is a people game. So you can take that experience from job to job, and although the industries have been very different that I've worked in, actually the principles of procurement will always be the same.
Yeah.
So the skill set as you work through your career in procurement is just really knowing how to approach different people, different areas. I don't fear anything, and I've kind of done so many different things, and I've enjoyed doing different things, and I enjoy that variety. So really, for me, are the industries different? Yes, the industry is different. Is the core principles of procurement different? No, not at all. And I think what I'd say is that when you work in medium, big companies, the other great thing is you're so often working with stakeholders who are experts.
Yeah.
And I always say there's two things that a stakeholder needs the most in a procurement world, and why they want to work with procurement. Actually, expertise is not the priority often. Number one, it's resource, which sounds a funny thing, but they're busy off as an HR director trying to do their things in HR. They haven't got time to think about, in your world, finding good recruiters, right? They haven't got the resource to do it. So often they really welcome resource and help. And then linking into that, it's that procurement expertise. So, the sort of life cycle piece on procurement that we do again and again and again, and coming in and knowing how to find suppliers, how to find capable suppliers, how to run tenders, how to negotiate, how to find exactly what they need, how to value engineer what they may need, how to put the right stuff in place, how to put the right supplier in place, and all the stuff I know you talk about a lot on this podcast. But that's the bit that I would say. I've gone on quite a bit on that question, haven't I?
No,
I
that's
could probably
great.
go on forever because I love it. It's a great
Yeah.
question, right? But in summary, that's what I'd say. The industries, of course, are different, but the core principles of procurement will always remain the same wherever you are.
And it's really interesting just picking up on that point, because there's a lot of narrative in the market around procurement transitioning very much from more the IQ to the EQ side. And you talk around sort of people. So let's explore that just a little bit more, if we may. So this is around sort of what emotional intelligence. This is around the social skills, the ability to flex communication style depending on the stakeholder. Is that something that you sort of inherently have? Have you learned that over your career, Tim? And what would you say to people that are sort of aspiring to be procurement leaders like yourself?
So I think it's difficult to be in procurement if you don't love people. That's what I would say, because you will so constantly be exposed to so many people in procurement, and you will work with so many people. The first part of that question was around sort of how do you successfully work with people, right? And kind of making that. And then for me, and I've done lots of different roles, the key stuff that you need to do when you go into any role or into any new area is it's all about really understanding the people you work with. It is a people game, procurement.
Yeah.
That's the skill that you learn over time. You obviously won't go into it knowing everything, and I don't know everything now. Clearly, I really hope that I'll learn a lot more over the next 10, 20 years, however long I'm in procurement for. So yeah, that's the piece for me. Is it's very people focused, developing those relationships, learning about it during your career. But from the core point of view, you have to love working with people. If you don't like working with people, I think you'll always struggle in procurement, to be honest. You're probably more, maybe if you like numbers but you don't like working with people, perhaps go more accountancy route or something like that, where you can sit there and do the analysis and less people time. Because actually in procurement, being a head of procurement, most of my time is spent working with people now, not in spreadsheets or tenders. It's unpicking how to best do stuff with the people I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I've watched your career flourish and grow, and you obviously recently in the last sort of 12, 18 months you've got into sort of your first sort of head of procurement role, very much leading the team. What did you find as your biggest challenge and opportunity when you made that step up into the role you're now in, Tim?
Biggest challenge would be the sheer variety of what you have to do.
Okay.
So when you're early on in your procurement career, if I take my very first role looking after distribution cleaning at Tesco, which I spoke about earlier, you know, I was just managing £3.5 million of spend. It was just cleaning, and it's just distribution centres. That's all it was, right? There's a lot of people who do that. There is a lot of skill involved, but you do come in every morning and you're just focusing on that one area. So you tender one thing one week, you then move and you tender another distribution centre the next week or the month after, whatever it looks like, or you're running a group tender. For me, the big challenge is just the sheer variety, and that's actually I've got to the point now where I will explain that to stakeholders, because you won't go onto every call and you'll know everything, and you won't go onto every call and have all the answers. And often I'll form the relations with stakeholders where I'll just say, I don't understand that, can you explain it? And the reason for that being is, think about my day to day. I've got time with you, I've got time with lawyers, I've got time with our IT director, I've got time with our marketing director, I've got time with HR and recruitment, so completely different. So all these things, but you just go to very different things all the time. So that, without question, is the biggest challenge coming into this role and my big learning.
Yeah.
And the second thing you said about opportunity, right? And then that probably links in perfectly to opportunity, because you cover so many things, you get to learn so many things. So that's why I was very happy to take this role and really wanted to do it. And the challenge of it was another sector, and it was head of procurement. So although I'd done lots of specialist roles during my career, I knew it would tick the boxes of stuff that I'd not done before. So
exploring that a bit
Go
further,
on.
then that a lot of that is around, I guess, prioritization for you, because I imagine you're going to have every stakeholder come to you going, Tim, I need your support with X, Y, and Z. You mentioned earlier legal, IT, the corporate team, they're all going to be wanting a bit of you, a bit of your time. So how do you prioritize that? Is it who can have their hand up the highest? Is it who can shout loudest? Or on a serious note, how do you prioritize your time?
That's a great question. It's funny you say that. I'm not sure I ever get it right. That's the other thing.
I think any of us do, to be honest with you. Yeah.
No, I know. It's difficult, and of course, like many other people, as well as you go through your career, your life doesn't get any less complicated as well. That's the other thing that I always say makes it interesting.
Yeah.
So it's easier earlier on in my career because I could wake up in the morning and the only thing I could think about was my day and whatever I wanted to do and how I wanted to manage the time. And then you get older and you have more responsibilities, and I've got family and kids, so it all gets a bit more difficult.
You've got a lot earlier alarm clock, haven't you, when you have small people in your house as well?
How my eyes looking? Are they tired?
I wasn't suggesting that. I've got an 18-month-old and I had about 4 hours sleep last night, so hence the coffee in hand. But yeah.
Yeah, I did that one the night before when the 7-year-old came into the bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. And
don't tell me that. Anyway. 7. I've got another 5.5 years. Okay.
That doesn't change. I should warn you now. There we go. No, you get different challenges. So yeah, so go back to your core question though, because I've kind of avoided it a little bit around how do you manage your time effectively. Again, it's all about you're always going to have the business priorities.
Yeah, of course.
So the one thing that I'm always going to know is, and I've put this in place since I've joined Leaders Romans Group, is we now have a supplier portal. We now store our contracts all through there, so I know when they're all expiring. So there's the core stuff that you have to do, which which will be the timings of contracts. Yeah. So that's one thing I say sort of forms a foundation of knowing what we need to work on. And then outside of that, there'll be the operational priorities or the business priorities they want to work on will be number 2. Mm-hmm. And then number 3, if I get time, it's the stuff that I would like to work on.
Yeah.
Or areas where I think I can have impact, which then that gets difficult because, I'll be completely honest, and this is the same challenge in so many procurement functions. There's so many things that I think we could do. And there's so many things that I think we could do to benefit the business fiscally, which would well outweigh the cost of a procurement function, but it's always a battle to get more procurement headcount ultimately for many people in many businesses, ultimately because they just see you as a cost. How much you shout about the savings you deliver, and our department pays itself at least probably 10, 15, 20-fold versus what we save. Even though you say that, people still go, oh, it's a cost though. So it's quite, even still then it's difficult. So Yeah, I'd say those three things. You're
Yeah.
working off of cyclical contracts. Second thing is business priorities. Then the third one would be what you want to make impact on, with always the restrictions around the resource that you can get to hand.
Yeah, absolutely. No, okay. And opportunities for you in 2024. I know you're growing your team at the moment, which is a brilliant opportunity for you to progress and have more resource and support in your function. But where else do you see the opportunities, both in terms of in your team, but also maybe broadly in procurement in 2024?
It's a challenging time in procurement, I think it's fair to say. So when you say opportunities within procurement, I think that the need for procurement is more critical than ever
Yeah.
in terms of what's gone on in the environment. So if I think about opportunities specifically, or challenges, opportunities, often they sort of fall
They
into
tend to
the
blur.
same
Yeah.
umbrella, don't they? They tend to blur, yeah. The big challenge at the moment that I'm sure lots of people we're speaking to about is inflation. Without question, it's like a massive, massive challenge, because typically businesses want to see like for like savings in a procurement world. You know, we spent 100 grand last year; it's now 90 grand. Well done, you've saved us 10 grand off our P&L. Where at the moment, yeah, I've had suppliers come to me with as much as 100% increases on their costs
Wow.
in a service-driven world, not goods here. So service-driven suppliers where, you know, they've sat on their hands for a really long time, and then we've gone through this COVID period and it's been really expensive for them. And inflation, what's been 23, 24%, the government inflation, whether that's true inflation, depends what sector you're in, of course, you know, has been over the last 3 years. And then, you know, suppliers come to us with really, really big increases. And it's challenging because there are monopoly suppliers in any industry. There's monopoly suppliers in the property world. And that's, when I say monopoly, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's not many alternatives,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of some of these industries. So opportunities, definitely, I think procurement is needed more than ever. Our opportunity is fighting inflation, which
Yeah.
is the big thing we're doing at the moment, and also selling to the business. That is our biggest challenge. And I've been talking about it for a year, and the business has kind of been going, yeah, yeah, we know about it. Yeah, we know about it.
Mm.
And then last sort of 3 months of last year, it was just waves of suppliers coming at us heavily for cost increase. And I was like, I did tell you.
Yeah.
You know, we've held it off for ages. I
Mm.
battered it off last year. um, they're going to withdraw supply.
Yeah.
So yes, that's interesting. Has that answered your question though? Because you did say
Yeah, no,
opportunities,
look,
didn't you?
it's a challenge.
It's
You know, speaking on a personal level as well, for me as a business owner, it's a challenge that we're having. With, you know, we're predominantly a service led business. You know, our product is people, so it's a service. But you know, we've got certain suppliers that we're working with was absolutely monopolised the market, and like you, they've said to us in some instances close to what you've alluded to, about 100% increase in price. And where do you go with that? Do you say no to the service, and then that has a detriment effect on your performance and delivery, or do you you know, or do you find an alternative? Or it's really hard to navigate in the market, and I think my sort of, I guess, frustration, to use the analogy from a resourcing point of view, is often where businesses will lower price point to give you work, but the point is you're then compromising on, because you're compromising on price, you're then compromising on the revenue you can generate. So it's a hard balance. It's a hard balance for business leaders across the whole of the UK at the moment. I think certain, as you were saying then, certain industry sectors have been hit harder than others, notably retail and hospitality, but every sector has been impacted. So I absolutely see that as a challenge, and how you navigate around that is really hard, isn't it? And because you want to add value, you want to understand your supplier and support them. And there are some mechanisms you can maybe put in on the commercials and rebates and some of the clauses, but ultimately you kind of need those suppliers, or you go back out to market. Do you think as a result of that there'll be a bit more of a rise of the macro business and SMEs that will come into market, or where do you see that? Because you're right, in certain sectors, a lot of the suppliers are monopolised by certain bigger in inverted commas suppliers that we're working with. So do you see an opportunity there for some of those smaller businesses, or what are your views on that?
Yes, definitely,
Mm.
without question. And I think that with the change of technology as well,
Mm.
there will always
Yes.
be. I think there'll be more and more suppliers coming into different sectors doing things that are innovative. It's interesting, isn't it? Because yeah, okay, let's get a bit of almost a boring conversation. It's not even started yet. You know, talk about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I've actually been with a couple of IT suppliers over the last week. Visit yesterday and a visit last week, and it's a big buzzword, right? And we're all talking about it. But it, you know, it is interesting looking at those different ways of working or those different processes or technological help that can help you run more efficiently. And I think it is definitely a watch out for some suppliers, because I think when you're raising your costs at that sort of level, and I've seen it. I'm starting to see it now, where there are some suppliers that are really, really critical that we have to work with, and it's a very difficult conversation. You really move into more the sort of empathy conversation with those suppliers, is how often approach it of, look, this is really difficult. We've not budgeted for it. I know you'd like that, but what other options are that we can look at to make it more feasible for our business? I wanted to work for you too because I need a strong relationship. So you're working through that part of it. But there are, on the flip side, I'm starting to see us leave some suppliers who come across as greedy, which is really interesting.
There's a balance, isn't there? Yeah, there is a balance.
There is, yeah, because I've seen suppliers, and I've gone back to we won't necessarily negotiate to start with, right? So I'll go back to the board and I'll say, it's FYI, I need to let you know, because it's proper process. A supplier has come back to us and they want 30% more, and the board will say to us, obviously, I want to have that impact of, I need to let them know, and they'll go, no way, not interested. Tell them we don't want to work with them anymore. And I'll go back to that supplier and I'll say, look, bad news. I've put this in front of the board, did it on purpose to make that impact. And they said, look, we don't want to work with you. And then some of them will go, okay, well, that's the price. And you go, look, I respect that. That's fine. But we can't work with you on that cost. We're being serious. But also other suppliers have come back and gone, oh, actually, I can hold my price. But then what's interesting at times is our business is then budgeted for other routes.
Yeah.
So we'll go, well, actually, wipe off the budget. We're not going to do it anymore. We're going to do this instead. So when you talk about SMEs coming in and people doing something different, then we have found that the business goes, actually, we don't need these two marketing routes. This supplier's coming across as a bit greedy. Let's just get rid of that and then put 75% of the cost into the other supplier for the moment. We can always go back.
Yeah.
And then you tell that supplier and they say no. So it is interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely an opportunity for sure for different businesses to do it differently.
And I guess it's prioritization around those top tier suppliers that you're having the most spend with, and you as you say, are critical versus some of those other ones. It's an interesting dynamic in terms of procurement, and then going back to, I guess, sort of talent and the evolution of that. Naturally, someone that's been recruiting it now for a long time, I'm always interested in people's sort of experiences and views on how you see talent changing. We've touched on earlier around the people side of things and that sort of transitioning more from the IQ to EQ, but how have you noticed it, particularly, recent hiring and things? What have you seen where the market was sort of when you started at Tesco versus where it is now, and the kind of procurement professionals that are in modern day functions?
I think businesses will always change through time, and things will always change, right? So just us having this call over video and having a great catch up is just completely different from pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously pre-COVID, we probably would have linked up on email. We would have met up in London somewhere and done it in a room or something like that. But now,
well, we did, didn't we? We met before many years ago. That was face to face. You probably wouldn't do it on Teams necessarily then, or video or wherever. Yeah.
But yeah, you're spot on. And actually, you got me into the job that I did back in 2018, and back then you did be face to face. And actually, ironically, then working at McLaren, I remember when they had Teams launch, and everyone was like, "Why would I talk to a supplier over Teams?" John, come into the office.
Yeah.
You still did that. So sort of going back to your question, though, I think life changes and business will change and needs change and demands change. That's just gonna be part of life, and I think it will only accelerate with tech constantly, right? Yeah, I think change will just always be rapid. It won't be any slower than it has been in our lifetime, so it'll only get faster. I think the challenge then for procurement, or the important thing for procurement, is that you need to constantly know you're not a finished article, and you need to constantly be willing to change. And actually, going back, I've been very lucky in my career, because going back to that sort of start of my career point of being thrown in the deep end and you just have to learn how to sink or swim, it's no different from today. And actually, when you then touched on sort of the recruitment piece and who I look for, when I actually recruit, I'm very rarely looking for an exceptional IT procurement person who's done it for 25 years and knows it all, and I can just leave completely to just go do the job. That's actually rarely what I look for. I'm so often looking for people that I know want to develop and want to change and want to learn,
Yeah.
because if I think in procurement, if you go into any role and you just think you know exactly what to do and what should happen, you'll just fall flat on your face. So to answer your question, I think, has procurement changed? I don't think it really has if you want to be good at it. But life does change.
Yeah.
So you need to learn to change and move with the world
Yeah.
if you want to be good at procurement. And that's the most important skill I think you need to have.
Definitely, and I think you've mentioned a couple of times around you're looking at more the sort of behaviours and the appetite to learn and develop. Playing devil's advocate a little bit, your growing function right now. If you were to be a head of procurement in a more, let's say an immature business with have a larger headcount, or flipping it around, you've got a big transformation going. Would you stay consistent on what you look for in individuals, irrespective of the maturity or size of the procurement function that you're leading?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Because that's often a conflicting and a very different answer depending on who I speak to. So that's
Really?
interesting.
Okay.
So why? I mean, I think that's a brilliant answer. But why out of interest would you always remain consistent with who you hire?
For me, it just doesn't matter if you work in a team of 1, 2, 5, 10, 20.
Yeah.
I would almost always rather have 5 people in a team that were open to change, open to collaborate, open to learn, were loved working with people, could unpick stuff, problem solve. I'd much rather have that dynamic than an HR procurement person, a marketing, an FM, an IT, who had done it for donkey's years and just kind of knew everything. I'd rather have that first thing. That's not to belittle, though, the value of experience in categories.
Yeah.
Because that can be very valuable. And there are some areas where it can be quite specialist. And I mentioned a couple there, IT and marketing in particular, can be a little bit specialist in what's required. But then what I'd often say there, though, is linking back to the stakeholder piece. And I mentioned earlier about working with stakeholders, and you're there to provide resource and procurement expertise, right? Then this falls back in. Then you have to be careful sometimes, I think, if you're a specialist, that you then blur the line between being a procurement person and running the function.
Yeah. And then that balance for you, which I find a challenge sometimes, of you're doing the doing versus setting the strategy. And you've got to take that sort of helicopter view sometimes, but you also don't want to be too far removed. It is a delicate balance, isn't it, as a leader?
100%. 100%. And if I could just use an example just to
build
on that and what we're discussing. When I was back at Sainsbury's, I looked after trolleys, which is sounds really interesting, doesn't it? But Sainsbury's at the time had a quarter of a million trolleys, so 250,000 trolleys to look after across how many, hundreds of stores. So it's a fascinating world. But in that world, it was, oh yeah, Tim, you're now buying manager for trolleys. That's your role. I was like, okay, right. Who's the stakeholder? Oh no, you're literally managing it as well. So
Wow.
if store managers needed more trolleys, I'd manage that supplier and get the trolleys in. So actually, this is the other bit that links into this of procurement, of course, is where do you have that divide? Because I always think that procurement has to have a stop. It's a dangerous place. But then some roles, in procurement, you might have a great stakeholder, or a stakeholder that's interested, or a stakeholder at all. So you have to do the job.
Yeah.
So you have to actually not only procure it, but then manage it. So it's really fascinating topics and discussion, isn't it?
You've really procured everything, Tim, under the sun, haven't you? Wow, love it, great. But and go back to your earlier point. It actually doesn't matter what you've procured; it's more around the individual and the behaviours and stuff. So no, I totally agree. Quick break from the episode. I hope you're enjoying today's show. To keep up to date with our Talent Talks podcast episodes, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. This will help build our audience and our mission to raise the profile of procurement. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. From your career then today, reflecting on all the great businesses and the great managers and people that you've worked for and with, what would you say your biggest learn has been?
I'm very aware I've been very lucky in my career because I've done many different things like you touched on. I was really lucky to get to go and work abroad in Hong Kong, which I did for a number of years, as you know, and source out there. I would say that if anyone gets an opportunity to do something internationally, then I would really grab it with both hands, because that's an invaluable experience. Completely changed me,
Mm.
because it's very easy to get accustomed to working with people in the UK, but then when you go and work in other cultures, you learn so much about how to do things. I think you gain a lot of cultural understanding and empathy through doing that. And probably that's how I'd summarize probably that question. Really, is just my biggest tip to people working almost in any career is just, challenge yourself and throw yourself into as many things as possible.
Mm.
It really is. And life is, it's cliche, it's pretty short. So, I would never sit in the role doing the same thing for 8, 10 years. That wouldn't interest me. And I think you definitely would have a learning curve where it just starts to burn out.
Mm.
So I think I should probably caveat that a little bit. 8 to 10 years in the same role, doing exactly the same thing. Of course, you could be a head of procurement somewhere, and it could
Of
change,
course.
and you could move around in different business areas, and you could make acquisitions and do different stuff. But just doing exactly the same role for a long period of time wouldn't interest me. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing I'd say that I've learned over my career, and people I've worked with, and the way I've worked under different people, is I've just got to where I am and learned so much just doing so many different things.
Yeah.
And I would always encourage anyone in procurement to grasp as many opportunities as possible to learn.
What was it like working out in Hong Kong?
Brilliant,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Yeah, just incredible.
Because it's a
And
westernized versus east culture, isn't it? It kind of blend the two. Obviously, yeah, you used to be part of the British Embassy. So what was that like? Yeah, what was that like for you?
have you been?
No, I've not. That's kind of one of the reasons why I'm asking. It's on my
Yeah.
bucket list, but no, I've never been.
Yeah, it's an incredible place with incredible people, and you're right, it's the sort of perfect East meets West. So yeah, it was just a brilliant experience, and yeah, you had everything from home
Yeah,
in Hong Kong. Literally most things from home that you could get. Which is the great thing about Hong Kong. But then you could walk 20 meters down the road and get local Chinese food in a little restaurant that has nothing written in English.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then walk another 20 yards and be back in a very westernized brunch place. It's that sort of environment. So it's just, yeah, it's a brilliant place to work, a brilliant place to travel from, and yeah, just a great experience.
yeah. Amazing. One thing that I wanted to add in, actually, if it's okay, was I was seeing some stuff online on Monday around early in the week on kind of the whole category management versus business partnering approach. What's right? What's wrong? Does it depend on department? Like we were saying earlier, does it depend on the maturity of procurement? Where are you in that camp? Because you worked in both. You've worked in functions where you have had a category line approach, and I also know you've worked in businesses where it has been a bit more project sort of orientated and business partnering sort of approach. What are your views on that?
Yeah, and I would my natural thing to say there would need to be a balance
Okay.
for sure,
Yeah.
because some categories have constant needs, and you can't leave things alone. It's the famous cliche, isn't it? That I'm
Yeah.
sure the stat is something like, if you put a 5-year contract in place,
Yeah.
if you have no commercial management on it, you lose half of any savings you deliver through leakage, because it's not being managed properly. So
Yeah.
the supplier will just, oh, you need a bit of extra, here's another cost. It's not
Yeah.
if it's not managed properly, then savings will be lost either operationally or commercially. So I think it's a balance. Then at the same time, though, companies will always need projects delivered. I think the one thing I would say about that, from my experience on projects being delivered, is often they're never well forecasted.
Mm.
So it's like, oh, my world, and this is no criticism. It's just what happens in life. But businesses, my business will come to me and say, oh, we want to do this, and it's happening. Oh, and can you get an RFP pulled together in a week? And I'll be going, where in the diary am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
All these other things that you want me to deliver.
Yeah.
If you want me to do that, then that's a 3-4 day bit of work that means everything else doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's probably that, because sort of resource planning gets a little more difficult. So I'd say categories always have the requirements. Projects will always come up. The challenge of projects is resourcing
Yeah.
for them effectively to deliver them well, of course.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, that do you heavily get involved, or do you very much light touch it and just make it happen?
Yeah.
It's always a difficult thing.
No, perfect. No,
We
good.
get back to priorities again, aren't we? How do you prioritize things on a
Prioritization.
Monday
Yeah,
morning
it
for
does
the
come
week?
back
It's
to it,
so
doesn't it?
hard.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no right or wrong, is there?
Yeah.
There's never a right or wrong.
Yeah.
And you never know on the results as well. I'm sure you find in your business, you could go, right, I'm going to spend a load of time with these clients, and then 3 months later, there's just no roles that you can work on.
Yeah.
You don't even know the output sometimes, which is always tough.
not knowing the output, I would say if I had to summarize 2023 for our business, I think that would be something around that. Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. Yeah. And to sort of, my final question would be around, I guess, kind of a bit more of a reflective question, or indeed maybe a bit of advice actually for people that are listening in, whether they're a buyer or a peer of yours in procurement leadership. What advice would you give to anyone in procurement right now in 2024 to allow them to thrive and be successful in their day-to-day?
I would say that we are working in a very changing world, and fiscally it's been very, very challenging for many, many businesses, as we've covered in this podcast. So I would say the most critical thing right now is to really, really develop the relationships with the people you work with. Spend time with them, understand them really, really well, and form as trusting a relationship as you possibly can. That would be my real tip right now, because they're under, a lot of the stakeholders I work with are under significant pressure, both operationally and from a financial point of view, because of the environment we've been in. And you kind of need to be a real trusted advisor, because otherwise, and you'll always see it, they'll just shoot from the hip and have to make decisions. And if you're not in the loop, then you might be too far behind to make the impact that you need to make. Yeah. So just stay close to people right now and form those really, really good relationships.
Great advice. Thanks, Tim. Totally agree. No, Tim, it's been great to catch up. Great to see you again. I'm so glad it's all going well there. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and knowledge. And I look forward to seeing the next part of your journey, and wish you all the best in 2024.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure catching up as always.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Take care. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and we'll be back soon with more Talent Talks podcasts. In the meantime, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite platform. See you soon. Take care.